What if the most profitable product ever created wasn't oil, gold, or technology, but something invisible you use every day without noticing? It doesn't need factories or workers. It only needs your trust. That product is debt, the hidden engine of the modern world. Welcome to Let's Talk About Money, where we uncover the true history of wealth, control, and how financial power shapes your life. Debt begins with a promise, "I'll pay you later." But behind that promise hides the oldest form of control humanity has ever known. The moment you add interest, time itself becomes a commodity. Every second transfers wealth from debtor to creditor. In ancient Mesopotamia, 4,000 years ago, kings recorded loans on clay tablets, and when citizens suffered, they wiped them clean. These were debt jubilees, resets of society, acknowledging that too much debt destroys nations from within. The Hebrew Bible echoed the same wisdom. Every 50 years, debts were forgiven, slaves freed, land returned. Unchecked debt destroys freedom. But over centuries, that lesson was forgotten. Elites learned not to erase debt, but to weaponize it. In medieval Europe, charging interest was banned by the church. Yet bankers disguised loans as trade or complex contracts. By the Renaissance, families like the Medici built empires on credit, financing kings and popes, trading gold for influence. They conquered not with armies, but with ledgers. A loan wasn't just money, it was power. The 17th century changed everything. The Dutch Republic, fighting Spain, sold government bonds to its citizens. War was no longer limited by gold. It could be financed indefinitely by selling the future. England copied the system. In 1694, the Bank of England was founded, formalizing national debt as permanent. Now governments didn't just borrow in crisis, they lived on borrowing. Debt became the foundation of state power. Lending to governments was safe, profitable, and endless. Wars could be fought forever, paid for by taxpayers. By the 18th century, bond markets in London and Amsterdam became the heart of global finance. Empires rose and fell, fueled by borrowed money. Debt had become a business model and the engine of history. By the industrial age, debt touched everyone. Factories, railroads, even cities ran on credit. Workers earned wages from companies funded by loans, then borrowed themselves to buy homes and goods. Debt seeped into every layer of life. By the 20th century, borrowing wasn't rare. It was the rule. Mortgages, car loans, student debt. Every dream came with a payment plan. The system didn't allow debt. It depended on it. Each monthly interest payment quietly moved wealth upward, millions paying a few. A 30-year mortgage doubles the house's price. Credit cards grow faster than wages. Ownership becomes obligation. Meanwhile, governments learned the same trick. They could promise benefits today and push the cost to the future. Central banks created money from nothing, keeping the system alive with cheap credit. Debt stopped being temporary. It became the foundation of the global economy. In 1944, Bretton Woods created the IMF and World Bank, in theory, to help nations, in reality, to control them. Countries could borrow only by following orders. Privatize, cut, obey. Debt became a leash, not a lifeline. Nations that borrowed too much found sovereignty itself for sale. Creditors dictated policy from afar. At the same time, households became the next frontier. The mortgage became the crown of the middle class. Home ownership was sold as freedom, but it chained families to decades of repayment. Then came cars, appliances, and credit cards. Debt turned from shame into pride. By now, pay later became the creed of modern prosperity. Banks earned steady profits. Governments fueled growth. Corporations gained lifetime customers. Debt was the hidden engine of capitalism and the perfect product, because it never stopped selling. But by the 1970s and 80s, the addiction reached breaking point. Developing nations borrowed heavily, and when U.S. interest rates spiked, they couldn't pay. Mexico's 1980 to default triggered a global debt crisis. The solution? More loans, under harsher terms. Borrow to survive, borrow to repay. A cycle of dependency, enforced by the IMF. Meanwhile, Wall Street found a new gold mine, selling debt itself. Loans became tradable assets, mortgages, bonds, securities, risk disguised as opportunity. Debt became the world's most lucrative commodity, promises packaged and sold for profit. In 2008, that illusion collapsed. Trillions in mortgage-backed debt imploded. Families lost homes and savings. Governments rescued the culprits, not the people. The message was clear: debtors lose, creditors win. Instead of reform, the system doubled down. Central banks printed trillions and cut rates to zero. They called it stability. In truth, it was addiction, cheap money for markets, rising costs for everyone else. Global debt now exceeds $300 trillion, triple the world's annual output. Politicians call it growth, but it's borrowed time. Inflation becomes the hidden tax that keeps it alive. A student borrows for a degree. A family signs for a home. A government spends beyond means. Debt is sold as freedom, but it's freedom you must buy. Banks profit from interest. Investors trade the debt. Failure itself becomes profitable. Every loan feeds a pyramid of beneficiaries, and you're at the bottom. Every payment funnels upward. The rich borrow cheap to grow richer. The poor borrow expensive to survive. Debt mirrors inequality, polished by finance to look like opportunity. Now, a new version rises: central bank digital currencies, programmable, traceable, controllable. Loans approved by algorithm, interest and penalties automated. Total visibility, total control. Efficiency for the creditor means less freedom for the debtor. Debt has evolved, the perfect business, upgraded for the digital age. Debt isn't neutral, it's design, the most profitable design ever made. To understand debt is to see the machine that rules modern life, a machine that profits when you owe. Real freedom begins when you stop mistaking credit for wealth. Empires fall, but the pattern repeats. Mesopotamia's tablets, Dutch bonds, Wall Street's derivatives. Debt enriches the few, enslaves the many, and shapes the world in their image. But awareness is resistance. History, if you learn it, is your defense. This is Let's Talk About Money. Subscribe, like, and share. It costs nothing. But the truth is priceless.